I've been around this business, between slot car racing, RC racing, since I was 9 years old. I've been racing slot cars. RC I started back in 1970, so I've been here doing this a long time. So I understand everything pretty much that you need to know how to make things go fast. Jimmy's been doing this. He's an electrical engineer. He knows he's going to do the motor tech. He's been doing this as long as anybody else. Back in the day when we only had Mabuchi motors to run, there was no brushed motors, there was nothing. There was Mabuchi motors, and that's what you ran, which basically is a version of these, just a smaller, lighter version of it. So what Jimmy's going to do is Jimmy's going to explain. We're going to start by first breaking in a get the stock motor started. It's one out of the bag, and Jimmy will show you how to get that started, and I'm going to explain why he's starting things up there. All right, when you go buy these motors, and you're buying them off a motor builder, all right, you think you're getting the best motor out there? You're not. You're not. The guys are keeping the motors that are good. They have a dyno, they're dynoing them, the specs come up, they get a good one, they're giving it to their drivers. You got about as much chance of getting a top 10 motor as a man in the moon if you're buying them. All right, what I'm going to show you today is how to make one. You don't need a dyno. It helps to have one, but you don't need one. You see what I do around here? I do it at Ultimate. I turn fast lap pretty much every week I'm there. Out of that jar comes that motor. That's it. I don't have specs. I don't have anything. Jimmy's going to show you how to read the power supply so you can understand what that motor's producing. And he can explain watts versus amps and what amps and versus times watts. So Jimmy's going to start that. He's going to start explaining that to you, and I'm just going to sit back and watch him do the work.
With water is conductive. It's also a lubricant. So the biggest thing with these is these are carbon brushes. The carbon, you need to wear off the end of the brush to get to the copper. That's the first thing you want to do. And in doing so, what that'll do is that carbon, if you don't clean it, you go out and race, the first thing you'll see is a big black streak around the commutator. And then you'll say, geez, my motor got slow all of a sudden. That's because of the carbon buildup. Breaking it in water allows that carbon to be flushed off the brush, the copper exposed. If you look at watts, everybody that does motor tuning and stuff, they always say, well, this motor's 50 watts, 60 watts, 70 watts, whatever it happens to be. That is amps times your voltage equals watts. It's not rocket science. It's just a straight formula multiplication. So if you have 12 watts and you have 12 volts and you're running at 2 amps, you have 24 watts of power. That's all it is. That's a simple formula for that. Okay, but what this does breaking in, as these brushes turn, obviously they're conductive. They're drawing current from the power supply. That water, being conductive, comes around and washes all that debris off the brushes. So what happens is it keeps the commutator clean, and then once you get that clean and the face of that brush is seated, the motor's ready to run. So you'll see initially, if you break your own motors in, and they do it at different levels. I like to start about 1.5 volts on a new motor. Some guys are always a lot higher. And then I work my way up to about 3, take it out, wash it, run it at 6, and that'll set the basic amp draw. What'll happen is you'll see the amp start out pretty low. That's because there's very limited contact with the motor brush. So what you want that motor brush to do is form around that commutator. Once that brush wears, and then the commutator's round, that gives you the maximum conduction you're going to get to that commutator. The other thing is, and I won't get into it, is the magnet structure. That's done by the factory. That's why some motors you see out of the bag, even if you break them in, you'll see one motor runs much better than the other. These are mass-produced magnets. They sit there, they zap them, they glue them in, put the motor together down the assembly line. So the better motor you can get are going to have 2 magnets that are equally charged and equally matched. That's the best rotation. Think of it as elliptical. If I have something unbalanced here and I have something balanced here, you're going to get this kind of rotation. The same with magnets in the motor. You can't control that. They do make, back in the day, they make magnet zappers, all kinds of stuff to get power into the motor. That'll also help with your amp draw. But the biggest enemy to these motors is heat. You overheat them, the magnets start to go away. So does your power. So that's the big thing. The second thing is keep them oiled, keep them clean. If you get a lot of fine dust, that's just the way it is. It's a dirt track. When you're done racing that event or every other event, whatever you feel comfortable with, wash your motor out. Mike has the motor clean in the shop. Buy a can of that, give it a simple spray, let it dry out, oil both your bushings. Failure to oil these, you'll find out that this can bushing will wear very quickly. And next thing you're going to have this, and the motor's shot. There's nothing you can do about it. So clean it and oil it. Don't be afraid to do that. That keeps them good. So what I'll do is I'm going to set this up. Let me get my glasses so I can see what I'm doing.
Anything specific you should oil it with?
What's that?
Anything specific you should oil it with or whatever?
Bushing oil. Good grade of bushing oil.
Synthetic,
yes.
lightweight, latest oil you can find.
Right. Anything good synthetic will stay. You want to buy an oil that won't sling. That's the other problem. When you get into that, sometimes oiling that bushing, some of these cheap oils that are out there, the minute you put it in, the motor turns, the oil slings out and the bearing's dry anyway. So you want to get a good synthetic oil, usually about 20 weight, maybe in that range. They don't tell you that, but you'll see between a ball bearing oil is like water, and then your bushing oil is a little thicker. So you want to oil that, rotate the shaft a couple times, work it into the bushing, and then do your race. When you're done with your race, you can always clean the motor then or clean it in between, whatever you want to do. But make sure you oil that bushing. That is critical. So the big thing there again is oil helps the motor free up. It'll turn better RPMs. If it's dry, it's basically galling, what they call galling the bushing. The shaft is trying to freeze to the bushing. So it's slowing you down, and eventually you seize the motor and you're done. So oil is very important. Cleaning is very important. Even if you're done doing a race, take it home during the week. If you get a little time, pull the motor out, wash it out. It's not going to hurt you. Put a battery in the vehicle, run it at low speed with your radio if you don't have a power supply or anything like that. Get that oil back in there, get the brushes clean, and you're ready for the next weekend. Okay?
What about calm oil?
About what?
What about calm oil?
Calm drops, you mean?
Calm drops.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of different calm drops out there. They're good for maybe a lap or two. The problem with the calm drop, they're highly conductive. People tend to want to do this and put the calm drops on and say, man, I got all the power in the world. No, you don't. You have a lightning ball. Because what's happening is that's conductive. So if you get too much calm drops on there, you're going to see a fire ring around the armature. It's going to pit the commutator and the motor's done. So,
You'll be fast for 5 laps though.
yes, it'll run like hell for 5 laps, and then you're going to put it in the trash and buy another motor from Mike. That's just the way it is. But again, you can also use those to break a motor in. I've seen guys use calm drops, but you got to use them by the directions. 1 or 2 drops, not a half the bottle. That's the big problem. Everybody saturates and thinks it's more power. It literally destroys the motor when you do that. So that's the difference. Then there's so many different brands out there. I mean, I've heard guys using different formulas for the brushes, you know, for the different calm solutions. Some are a little bit more of a gel type drop, some are thinner liquid. Worst case is it does help to clean the motor. So if you run the motor and you want to run it again, if you don't have a power supply, put your battery in the car, turn the radio on, run it at low speed for maybe a minute or 2. That's all you need. But cleanliness in that commutator is everything. If you can't get the power into that commutator to the motor, the power's not there, the motor's not there, you're not going anywhere. That's the big difference. Okay, let me set this guy up. We got about 3 volts, so that'll work.
So you're breaking it in at 3 volts.
Yeah, I'm going to start this one. Since this is already set up for 3, it doesn't make that much difference. Oh, here's the problem. Now you can do it 1 of 2 ways. It doesn't matter if I dip this first and start it, or if I start it outside and put it in.
It does.
It'll still run.
It creates a big arc though.
Well, yeah, it will create some arcing. So what you want to try to do is get your motor into liquid and then hook it up.
Just let it lay it in, Jimmy.
And then and then all you're going to do is get it started, drop it down, and just let it run. Now you're going to watch if you have a power supply, like right now that's pulling over 9 amps. So that shouldn't be too bad. Now you'll see that that'll continue to grow. And if you have a power supply, that'll continue to grow. When you start to see that amp start to roll over, you're right near perfection of the motor brushes. Then you want to take it out, wash it out, and then run it, oil it, run it again for a couple of minutes, make sure everything's okay. and then from there you're good to go.
Straight out of that hose.
Yeah, so that actually dropped.
Yeah.
That
You don't-
power draw actually dropped down to about 2 volts. So we're limited at 10. So now since we're limiting at 10, the voltage is going to drop to maintain that power. As that power comes back up, the voltage comes up, the motor's breaking in. And you'll see this will start to turn black. That's that carbon on those brushes. How Traxxas does it is actually like 2 half moons in their brush. Some of the typical brushes are all one piece, goes against the commutator. Traxxas use a brush that's serrated. What that allows them to do is, as these tips wear, they break in faster. On a full brush, it takes you longer to break it in because you're literally taking the debris across the face of the brush and getting rid of it. On these, since you have 3 areas, you have 2 cleaning spots in between. So as this runs through, it's actually pulling the dirt through there, the carbon out of the brush. So you can see it's already starting to get dark. You know, you can see the brush starting to wear in. So that's coming up.
Kosher.
But that's basically the easiest way to break it in. Is just let it run there, monitor your amps. I mean, if you have something to do, just let it sit in the bottle and do its thing. Sometimes you're going to see some motors have a little more carbon on the face than others. So if this gets black quicker, take it out, stop for a second, put fresh water and start again. Some people say you got to run distilled water. I've never run distilled water. There are chemicals in here, but again, the water is simply a lubricant between the brush and the armature. So as that armature rotates, that brush is making contact, the water's in there to lubricate that. That's where the break-in comes from, because the water's conductive. So as that goes across there, that just keeps smoothing that brush around and around. I should have brought my
Then it keeps the wear down. Yeah,
I should have brought my otoscope.
Yeah,
Look
look
at
at that.
saw it. Now, when you, what's that?
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So, now, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to,
Yeah.
but I'm looking for basic help. So sitting in here on a little machine and running the motor without feeding the motor, is it any good?
Well, the problem when you run a motor dry, you already have to remember you got a brand new brush that's not seated.
I understand how it works, and that's exactly, you're already answering my question.
Yeah. So when I have fresh copper, the more roughness of this copper that's not smooth, the more arcing you're going to get, the faster the motor's going to wear, and the hotter it's going to run.
So it's more efficient to break it in the way you're doing it.
Yes,
versus
because I'm not arcing against the commutator. I'm not creating what they call a carbon trace.
You're
Yeah,
not,
if you
you're not
look
warming the
in-
magnets up.
Yeah, if you look inside one of these and you break it in dry, since that has like 3 different areas, you look into that motor, you're going to see 3 black rings around that commutator. That's because all that material on the brush burned itself to the commutator. So you already start taking performance out of the motor.
That's fine. You answered my question.
Yeah, so that's the big thing. Now, there's a couple ways to clean them. A couple guys use like a Q-tip and a cleaner or something like that. Barry came up with a way with a little stone. It's like a polishing stone. And you can get in there with that. And even at the track here, you can actually go in through the, when I take this out, I'll show you. There's 4 little slots at the top of the motor and the end bell. You can go into that with a Q-tip or like his little polishing stone, and you can go in there and manually turn it. They don't need power at that point. You just go in with that thing, turn it a couple of times, and you'll see that black ring will disappear around the motor. So now you have better brush contact, you have more conductivity, and you're going to have more power. Watts or power, that's exactly what that means. That's the big difference. So if you take any of these motors, you have 4 holes on top. So if you look at the motor, you're going to see the brush arm comes actually down, and then you have a brush against the face. So if you look through here, you can actually see with a light, you can actually see the commutator. The commutator is that copper part that sits vertically. So once you go in there and you go in with a cleaner or something, and again, you don't need to force it, you just need a light touch. Sit there, turn it with your gear a couple of times, and that'll polish that right back up again.
What do you recommend?
I've seen guys use a Q-tip and a cleaner. I've seen like these comm sticks that they make for slot car motors and stuff. It's a very mild abrasive, and that's all you want to do. That's all you're doing is cleaning it. I've seen some guys use simple green and a Q-tip. There's a lot of different ways, but ideally you want to get those black rings off the car. Yeah, anything that's not very abrasive. I've already used baking soda. That's another one. A Q-tip, a little baking soda, run it around there and then wash it out, oil it.
You ever use the Brasso?
A lot of guys use Brasso. I've seen that already. The problem with Brasso is Brasso has a chemical in it the brush tends to absorb. So what happens is until you sweat that back out of the brush, that can create some arc. So you have to be careful. But Brasso is a fantastic polish. But again, since you're not applying power, as long as you put that in and don't soak it, and you turn it and get it clean and wash it out well, you should be fine. But whatever works to be able to polish that. What you're actually trying to do, when you look at the Commutator, it's nothing more than a piece of copper. There are 3 poles on the motor, and each pole is wound with 12 turns of wire. That's what the 12T is. 12 turns. That's what the factory calls it. So that copper on your high-end motors is a very high-grade copper. These are mass-produced. So what happens, if you even look at a brand new motor, you'll see it's kind of like rough when you look at the copper. It's not shiny, any of that. You want to get that as shiny as you possibly can. Any high, low spots in that Commutator is hardy. And especially as the motor gets old, some spots in the Commutator tends to wear a little faster than others. Well, now you have a little bit of eccentric in there. So you have what they call brush bounce, brush float, a lot of different things when you get to the higher RPM. That's why Traxxas changed these a couple years ago, and they went to a different brush in the holder. Your arm, instead of coming out straight, now comes out at an angle. And when that brush goes in, this is now reinforced. That's why they live longer. But again, the same thing with that. If you look at a motor brush and you're into the motor, you'll see if that motor brush is turning colors, like a bluish color or a tint to it, you've got the motor way too hot. You also have to remember, once you get that motor brush hard, it becomes brittle. And that shortens the life of the motor tremendously. So if you guys are measuring with a temperature gun or anything like that, 100, 110, 120 max, you don't want to be out of that range. That's the sweet spot. So change your gearing, whatever you have to do. Take your gearbox apart, make it freer. You know, those whole things. Anything you can do to let that motor do its job is going to be better for the motor. So that's the big thing. Any questions on the brushes or how they work? Everybody good on that? Okay. So, yeah. I've seen guys do that. Water's water. Anything, again, Simple Green is a chemical base. Yeah.
The idea behind the Simple Green is it washes the part.
Yes.
That's the idea behind the Simple Green.
Yeah.
We did it in slot car racing.
Yeah.
Years ago when they made this carbon tent, you used to be able to buy it.
Yeah, carbon tetrachloride.
You used to just drop the whole motor in carbon tent and run it in.
Yeah, that's
the problem with that is you cause cancer. That's why
if you've ever used it, your skin literally turns white. It sucks all the oil out of your skin. So the outlaw.
you can't buy it anymore.
You can't buy it anymore. Maybe we might go to Canada or someplace to get it, but you won't get it in the US. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, but you got to realize what you're leaving behind. Right. Whatever you're putting in it, it's going to be sitting on your wire, it's going to be sitting on your bags. The traction, if it's the film leaving, that's all stuff that's going to impede your performance. So there's no reason to add anything more than water, or you can use TV Blaster makes a part washer solution. That's a water base, and you can use that, and that'll help clean the carbon off too.
Yeah, like some of your old chemical carb cleaners and stuff have been outlawed. So now
they've been doing that since probably 1950.
Oh my God, as long as I can remember, yeah.
So in slot car racing, which was before long, before all this stuff, that's how you broke motors. And that's why the slot car guys always had a big advantage. Most of these national champions were slot car racers. Here's a little trick. I don't know if you're going to be able to find it. They do make them. This is what they call a polishing stick. Right? I don't know, it's about 3/16 in diameter maybe. All it is it's a sanding stick. Basically all it is. Alright, I think you can get it from McMaster Card Ranger.
Yeah.
Alright, you can get them in different grids, all that stuff. So what I did, and Brian, we were all sitting here in the winter contemplating how to make these motors faster. And he started coming up with this kind of stuff. What this is basically a makeup stick. They use it for makeup for girls. They have little cotton swabs on the end of it, all right? So beans and some of the shit that we were doing doesn't seem to work too well. It works, but it isn't the key. We used to use these on comms for slot cars, all right? And that's how we cleaned before there was lathes and all this other stuff. That's how we used to clean them. We used to use what they call comm sticks. So the problem with these motors is you can't take the brush out like you can in the slot car motor and stick this in a brush holder and sit there and spin the motor. All right, so I had to get ingenious. So I had this, and I had this. So all I did here was take this piece of comm stick, cut a little chunk of it off with an X-Acto knife, drill a hole in the center of it, cut the little pad off of here on the makeup brush, and crazy glue it to the end of the stick. All right. So now what I got now is I got a stick that's got sandpaper on the end of it technically, but it's a real fine grit. All right. Now in this condition, it's too big to put in the motor. It won't fit. You can get it in there, but you can't get it down. So once I got that done, then I just took my Dremel tool and kind of rounded this up. So now you can just stick it right in there. All right. And then where your brush is, you can see your brush. Your brush sits right here. So all you gotta do is stick it in here like that. Take your finger, don't push on it too hard, and spin the motor. I use a drill at home, but here, you know, you can do it here, but at the track. Just keep spinning it a couple times, and you're going to see that comm start polishing up a little bit. It takes a while to do it. It probably takes me 15 minutes here at the track just to clean it up a little bit. So if you got a tired motor and you go, hey, you know what? I don't want to buy a new motor tonight. If you can come up with something like this, all you guys. This will get you probably 3 or 4 weeks on the motor. That motor Jimmy ran tonight was one of these motors. Yep. I took it out of the car, cleaned it, and gave it to him, and he ran it, and he finished third. He was right there with the rest of it. And that motor is probably 6 weeks old. So it does work. It's proven. I do it all the time. When I go home at night, when I'm sitting watching TV, the motor comes out, and I'm just doing this while I'm watching TV. Polishing the comm. Yep.
Yeah, that's why I say when you're at home during the week, yeah, it's easy to take your car apart and clean the bearings and everything anyway. So while you pull the motor out and clean it.
That's what that is right there. Like I said, you can buy these by the thousands. I think they're $3 or $4 for 1,000 of them. So if you want any, I got bags of them at home. Just give me all you want. But I only need one. So if you guys want to start looking for stuff to trick yourselves out and save yourself some money, go look on Granger thing. They're gold polishing sticks. You can get any diameter you can get because you can sand them down to whatever size you need when you're done. Just take another Dremel tool and make them to the size that you can get inside this comm. You know.
Yeah. And again, it's not a lot of pressure. You just want to clean the debris off the comm.
And believe me, when I'm done with this, it's like a new motor when it's all done. Now it's discolored because of the temperature. You know, it's usually a little bit of more of a gold than is bronze because it's already temped up the temperature. But it does make a huge difference in the way the motor runs. So that's a little trick that I do to make your motor faster and get a little more life out of it. So I don't know how's
Good thing you locked it.
Yeah, exactly. How's that going?
Good. We're up to our amps are still about 9.5. But right now we're up to about a little over 2 volts, so it is breaking in. Yeah, it's starting to break in. And now you can see the water. You see how much darker that's gotten. You see the ridge around the top. That's all the carbon from the brush that wore off in the water as it's washing the face of that brush and getting that to smooth out.
It's funny. I was sitting there last week breaking the motor in, and I normally don't sit and watch the motors when they're breaking in, but like I said, I was playing with this, and I was watching it. As that voltage comes up, you can actually, it's kind of like watching your batteries charge. As they get full charge, you see the voltage go real quick, comes up. It's the same there. Once those brushes start breaking in, the voltage just starts climbing. And I mean, climbing fast. I mean, it's like 0.10, 0.11, 0.12, it just comes in, instead of like 0.10, 11, it just starts climbing and climbing and climbing.
Motor in and see where that amp curve actually hits. Once you start rolling over that amp curve and the amps start to drop off, those brushes are seated. And then the best thing, like we did there, is you wash it out really good, oil it, and just run it, and then you can see what your normal amps are. Now that was at 3 volts, and that was pulling over 4 amps. That's a good motor.
Yeah, that's going to run.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to run very well.
It's going to run real well.
So yep. So that one you can.
For a week or two.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for a week.
Well,
yeah.
again,
Yeah.
the
Brian
same-
brings up a good point.
Yeah.
All right, listen. Brian was in there listening to some guys talk in the shop and stuff like, oh, I have a motor in for 3 months, 4 months. Last year, I don't want to kid you guys. These motors last 2 or 3 weeks in high def racing. That's all. I mean, if you're racing,
They're about perfect when they're about wore out.
yeah. If you're racing like I do 2 days a week, I get about 3 weeks on a motor. That's it. And I don't do a lot of practicing either. So,
You won't like mine.
what's that?
You won't like mine. Mine's been for 2 months.
Oh, really? Yeah. You
Well,
just
that's the problem. I just did that today. I was pushing the motor I had. It was about 3 weeks old, and he said to me, "Replace it. That's junk. It's not getting off the corner." And,
Because-
and you really don't realize the motor starts to fall off, and you really don't feel it. You don't notice it. But when you put a new one in and you drive it, you notice it. You can tell it was worn out.
Yeah.
It's like when
No
you,
evidence
when you can really control your car at like this.
well,
maxed out,
that's the thing. You need
Yes.
you need a motor to control the car because that's what's driving the rear, and that's what I kept telling him. The motor's not driving the car. You are, and if you're driving the car, you're too slow. The motor's got to be driving that rear end. You know, so even if you replace one of these once a month, you're gonna be running a lot better than you are running a motor that's 3 or 4 months old. And especially on the floor in there. The reason Joe Ilg and all those guys are fast, every domain there's a new motor in the car. I know it because I was doing it at the end. And that's why I was finishing in the A mains. If you want to run in the A main, it's cost good money to do it, and that's, I don't know what else to tell you. You gotta race. Speed costs money. So it is what it is. But if,
You make money by selling speed.
yeah, right, exactly. So
That's why these lessons were $15.
Yep.
so it, like I said, there's a point where how competitive you really want to be, and how much it's going to cost you to do it. Just don't get disgusted because these guys are kicking your ass when you know they're putting motors in every week. That's stock racing. It's always been stock racing. It's always going to be stock racing. That's what it is, and it's always, you know, best thing I can tell you, if that upsets you, go into a brushless motor. You won't have that problem. You know.
We've got others.
There's other stuff out there to run besides brushed motors. The reason I'm still in it is because I always liked running brushed motors, because I know what to do with them, and I've been doing them all my life. So I'm getting into understanding these. I don't run brushed motors. I don't know the first thing about them. So, but I do like running brushed motors. You know. So anyway, any other questions I can help anybody with, or get you guys on your way? Good. All right, let's see who wins the motor.
All right, who wants to draw the ticket?
Yeah. Where's the little guy at? He's been sitting here the whole
There you go. Come on over and pick a ticket.
There you go. You've been nice enough to sit through all this. You can pick the winning ticket. Just pick one of them.
No pop tickets, though.
Yeah.
Daddy needs a motor.
There you
Okay,
go.
there's the. Oh, can I have that, please?
There you go.
There you go. Okay, read the winner.
Oh. All right. Let's do the last 3 digits. 500.
Wow, that was easy.
You don't have to go for it.
There you go. There's our winner.
All right, congratulations.
Congratulations. No
Too
problem.
bad he went brushless.
Here, I'll give you $5.
Awesome.
There you go. I'll give you $40 for it right off the bat, right?
Oh, you raised the price
Real
on it.
good one, so it's 150.
Yeah. 501. Did you miss the 501? Did you really?
I'll give you what you paid for it.
So I hope that helped you a little bit. I probably confused a lot more, and probably none of it makes sense. But at some point, believe me, what I told you is going to make a difference.
Yeah, plus if we have a problem, we'll just come over and say, hey, Barry, drive
Yeah,
my car. and come
drive
around
my
and
car.
go.
All you have to do is come on, take my car for a ride. And if I tell you it's slow, believe me, you're going to have to do something, because I can't drive my chassis don't work in a slow mode, and that's I keep telling Jimmy. I said, I can't drive your car. It doesn't go fast enough. So you gotta have enough speed to make the car do what he needed to do. So, you know, first thing I get into Aaron, I put on an air. How many times have I drove you going, what the hell are you running this thing? This thing don't go anywhere. It can't get out of its own way. You know? So you're finally starting to learn. So, all right, thanks for coming, guys. I hope I was help. Hope I didn't bore you too much.
Great
Hope
day
you
of
learned
racing.
something.
Barry.
If you want to do this again, I'll do transmissions next time.
Yeah, we'll do transmissions.
Yeah,
and I'll
put
do
something on
batteries.
the website. If you guys are interested in it. If I can help you out anywhere, I'll be more than happy any race day you
We'll give
here.
everybody on the internet your
There you go. All right, I already spent half the night on texting between you, Sal, Steve. Actually, Steve Weller. That's right, him right there. You know,
Harry, all working. Fix it.
yeah, you're going older tomorrow.
That'll be fine for breaking in, right?
Oh, that was good.
That's gonna take forever to
So,
Yeah, it is.
Oh, like the Bill Osborne motor box. Yeah, that's ready to go. Now you can see there's just 3 tiny lines there, but the rest is totally clean. I was going to pass it around and let him look at that.
Now, what did it wind up reading on the meter there?
Well, I was running at 3 volts, and it dropped all the way down to about 1.5 volts, and the amp stayed at 10.
what did it read when it was dry? Did you dry it out?
Well, I didn't run it when it was dry.
See what, just for the hell of it, just see what.
Yeah, we can do that.
Run it like 4 volts.
Do you like Bill's machine?
There's what is there's power supply?
His motor tester.
Yeah, the power supply. Where I mean, that's basically what Bill's is there. That one I'm running. I use the computer power supply to power it. I could hook it up to my.
Yeah, it has the same screen as what Bill's
I use
does.
it for my slot cars, so that's the only reason I have a big power supply at home that I run all my motors off. But that for carrying around is pretty good. But yeah, that works fine.
Yeah, you want to get yourself a good variable supply if you want to break in motors, and it has to be at least 10 amps.
Yeah, you want a 10 amp supply. I actually use a 5 amp. And what happens is when you get it at home, it's only running at about 2 or 3 volts is my break-in, so my break-ins take a little longer. But
Okay, at 3 volts, this is pulling 4.2 amps.
that's really good.
So that's a good, that's a good
That's
motor.
really good.
Sorry guys, we can't give you this.
It's probably as good as anything I can come up with.
What if you don't have a run box or power supply like this? Are you able to use your transmitter?
You can use your power your transmitter. Yeah, I don't like doing that because I don't care for it. I don't think it. Is there a difference, Jimmy, running off the speed control?
No, not really. But you're running all your electrics to make everything work, which doesn't hurt anything. But you can get a decent power supply if you go on some of these, even these foreign sites today.
This guy here.
Yeah, well, see, that's fixed.
That's fixed. That's fixed.
Yeah, you got to have something that's variable. You want to start out at a lower voltage and have at least a ceiling of about 10 amps. Like Barry said, when you get like this one, for example, when you get to 5 amps of draw, it starts to force your voltage down. So now this isn't as stable as it should be. This will start to come up as it breaks in. But if you start at 10 amps like this one, this was almost at the rail of the 10 amps. So now as it breaks in, those amps will start to come down, the voltage will come up. So your wattage remains the same, but now you know everything's seating. If you limit yourself too much on amps, you really never get to that ceiling. So you don't know where that RPM is going to roll over at. You want to have enough power that you can break the motor in and see where that amp curve actually hits. Once you start rolling over that amp curve and the amps start to drop off, those brushes are seated. And then the best thing like we did there is you wash it out really good, oil it, and just run it, and then you can see what your normal amps are. And that was at 3 volts, and that was pulling over 4 amps. That's a good motor.
Yeah, that's going to run.
Yeah, that's going to run very well.
That's going to run real well.
So that one you can...
For a week or two.
Yeah, well, yeah, for a week.
Well,
Yeah,
again,
yeah. Brian brings up a good point.
Yeah.
All right, listen. Brian was in there listening to some guys talk in the shop and stuff like, oh, I had my motor in for 3 months, 4 months. Last year, I don't want to kid you guys. These motors last 2 or 3 weeks in high def racing. That's all. I mean, if you're racing,
They're about perfect when they're about wore out.
yeah. If you're racing like I do 2 days a week, I get about 3 weeks on the motor. That's it. And I don't do a lot of practicing either.
You
So
won't like mine.
what's that?
You won't like mine. Mine's been for 2 months.
Really? Yeah. You
Well,
just
that's the problem. I just did that today. I was pushing the motor I had. It was about 3 weeks old. And he said to me, replace it. That's junk. It's not getting off the corner. And you really don't realize the motor starts to fall off, and you really don't feel it. You don't notice it. But when you put a new one in and you drive it, you notice it. You can tell it was worn out.
Yeah.
There's no engine surprise.
When you can really control your car at like the
Well, that's the thing.
Yes.
You need a motor to control the car because that's what's driving the rear, and that's what I kept telling him. The motor's not driving the car. You are, and if you're driving the car, you're too slow. The motor's got to be driving that rear end. You know, so even if you replace one of these once a month, you're gonna be running a lot better than you are running a motor that's 3 or 4 months old. And especially on the floor in there. The reason Joe Ilg and all those guys are fast, every domain is a new motor in the car. I know it because I was doing it at the end, and that's why I was running finishing in the A mains. If you want to run in the A main, it's cost good money to do it, and that's I don't know what else to tell you. You got race speed costs money. So it is what it is. But if,
You make money by selling speed.
yeah, right, exactly. So
That's why these lessons were $15.
Yep.
so it, like I said, there's a point where how competitive you really want to be, and how much it's going to cost you to do it. Just don't get disgusted because these guys are kicking your ass when you know they're putting motors in every week. That's stock racing. It's always been stock racing. It's always going to be stock racing. That's what it is, and what it's always. You know, best thing I can tell you, if that upsets you, go into a brushless motor. You won't have that problem. You know?
You'll get others.
There's other stuff out there to run besides brushed motors. The reason I'm still in it is because I always like running brushed motors because I know what to do with them, and I've been doing them all my life. So I'm getting into understanding these. I don't run brushed motors. I don't know any first thing about them. But I do like running brushed motors. So anyway, any other questions I can help anybody with and get you guys on your way?